My name is Emmitt Hayes, and I am currently serving as Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees for Integral Care. After about 36 years in public service, I ended my career at the Texas, actually with the Travis County Juvenile Probation Department. Worked for a lot of years with the Texas Department of Alcohol and Drug Abuse, TCADA. Folks may remember that name from the old days. So I am a voice from the past that's speaking to you folks in the future. So welcome to our Together We Heal Forum, organized by the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference and Integral Care. The conference's vision is to educate the African American community and the community at large on mental health, substance use disorder, and intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as the total well-being of the African American community. We hope this forum will provide the opportunity for you to participate in conversations that offer education, encouragement, and resources. So before we begin, there are about 4 housekeeping rules. The first one being, of course, please turn off your microphones. There will be time for interaction. You will be able to raise your virtual hand, and when you're called upon, you will need to unmute your mic when we identify you. Now, if anyone should get emotional or overwhelmed during this presentation, please turn off your video so that you will be able to handle that time of emotions privately. If you need to talk to someone, please call the Integral Care Hotline, 24/7 hotline at 512-472-4357. I'm sure you will be able to find that in the chat box. There are CEUs available for social and mental health professionals. To receive the CEUs, you are required to sign in at the beginning of the forum and take the evaluation at the end of the forum. The links and instructions will be in the chat. So, note also that the forum will be recorded and it is streaming live on Facebook. So give us your best face with a smile. Thank you. So this is the conclusion of our 2-part series on the school to prison pipeline. Today we're talking about the youth justice reset, breaking the cycle. Our panelists today are Judge Denise Hernández. She serves as the presiding judge of Travis County Court at Law, number 6. She's also a community organizer. She also leads Transformative Youth Justice, and we welcome you, Judge Hernández. Also, we have Brother Bob Lilly. Rob Lilly. How can I say that? You know, coming from where I came from, Bob Lilly is a name that's probably known for cowboy fans. So please forgive me when I say that, Brother Rob. That's so much easier for me. Criminal justice and participatory defense organizer, and he is also with Grassroots leadership and a person with lived experiences. And finally, on our panel today, we have Brittney Walton, a mother of 4, a driver at the Manor ISD, and an educationist. We welcome her today, and we thank you all for being here. So, I think we're ready to get started. I'm going to start with you, Rob. Would you please contextualize the juvenile justice system as you experienced it and tell us how you navigated parole and the help you received or needed upon leaving detention?
First of all, I want to say good morning. Well, good afternoon. I'm in the morning. I'm in California right now. So I want to say good morning to everyone who has decided to tune in with us today. Is my volume all right, Mr. Hayes? Can you hear me just fine? Okay, wonderful. I want to very forthrightly say that you're looking at a gentleman with gray hair. And you may ask yourself, what could this person with gray hair contribute to a conversation around youth that are going through the criminal legal system as children, and I'm using my words carefully. The reason I believe I'm qualified to be in this space and to talk about this topic is because that was my trajectory. I myself was ensnared by the system at the tender age of 12 years old. That was my first in custody detention. And that behavior was first identified in the school setting, where I was selling marijuana or cannabis, and was apprehended on the school grounds and remanded over to custody. And several other incidents, similarly of the similar nature, would precede my entry into the juvenile detention center. Now, also for full disclosure, I've never experienced this system in the Texas state. My only experience was in California, although I have gone to prison 4 times from Texas. And so when we talk about lived experience, we're talking about somebody who's experienced these particular systems and has information and insights that you couldn't glean from reading a book. You have to have had the experience yourself. So let's just launch into what I experienced. One of the first things I think is important to talk about as a youth, having experienced the courts and the detention facilities, is that everyone was talking over my head. I was never given any real clear commitment or understanding from anybody in authority as to what support or resource they would offer me to address some of the underlying or root causes that put me in the position I was in. Mind you, I didn't have the word root cause in my vocabulary, but it should have been evident to those that were adults that something was troubling me for me to continue to exit in and out of this system. Sometimes even saying out loud with great anger, I'd rather be here than be at home. That should have been a pretty telltale sign that I had troubles in my life and I needed more than just punishment. Unfortunately, that didn't occur for me. I remember vividly, one thing I want to recount to you was that I want to recount the courtroom experiences. I always had an attorney. There was always the judge. The situation was set up no differently than any adult experience I've ever had. But I never could understand the language. No one ever really talked to me. They talked around me and over me. And as a result of that, I didn't grasp the gravity. I knew I was going away for some time. I knew that I was being detained. But I felt like somebody should have sat me down and given me more intimate interaction to help me make sense of the choices that I was making and the options that were available to me. That didn't quite occur. When I got out of that system, because so my experience was such that I would go in first, it would start off with a day or two. Then my parents would come pick me up, my stepmother and my father. I come home, they'd yell at me. There'd be no real structure. I'd get high, drunk, and sooner thereafter, I'd find myself shoplifting or doing something else that would put myself in the path of law enforcement to be arrested again. Then the detentions escalated. I remember going away to Camp Rocky. I remember doing a boot camp in the juvenile system, and then from there it went to Camp Rocky for a year. The boot camp situation was so harsh. They were so vindictive and so angry with us that I remember going to get 2 teeth extracted just to get a break, a relief from the cruelty that I was being subjected to in that system. That would end, and I would go on to another experience called Camp Rocky. I would stay there for a year. It was very military oriented. You had to sit in props on your bed. You had to make your bed 4 corners. So it was about drilling into us what they believed was discipline, but it never felt like real structure. It felt like, just angry orders that inwardly we resisted, outwardly we complied with. Eventually, I would spend 3 years on a 6-year sentence in California, and I would return to my family who was now living in Texas. And when I was released, I was informed that I should report to the facility in Texas. And what I'll tell you is that I reported there, and after that, I didn't report again. And as a result of that, within a year's time, I had 5 felony charges, and I was on my way to adult custody at 18 years of age. At 19 years of age, I was out for a year. I left at my 18th birthday. So now, very quickly, I found myself in the adult system, and I was beginning the journey of an adult person with incarceration. And my first sentence was one of the harshest I'd received, was a 10-year sentence. I did 10 months on it, but that 10-year sentence would be over my head. 4 weeks later, I'd be arrested again for a federal offense for possession of cocaine. And I would be sentenced to 120 months in federal prison, where I would spend from 21 years of age to 30 years of age. And what I'm trying to paint with this narrative is, we are talking today about a reset. We're talking, the underlying idea is, how do we prevent recidivism? If we don't think critically and creatively about this challenge today, you're going to be looking at more people like me, who may not have the words to describe what I've been through, but they're going to be persons that are cycling in and out of the system into their adult years. And the tragedy of this is, for me, some people can have a sympathy for children, and we can see them as children. But once they commit an offense, we start talking about their behaviors and making their behaviors the same as their identity. So they become their offenses, and we lose empathy and sympathy for their context, the nature of their dilemma that they're faced with. And in my instance, I feel like that occurred. I'm gonna yield my comments to say this in closing. When I came home from prison, I remember one vivid re-entry experience. I remember knowing that I didn't want to smoke or do any drugs, because I knew somehow that was connected to my repeated, entering into the system. So I remember one of my stepsisters passing me a blunt, which is cannabis rolled up in cigar paper. And I remember telling her no. And I remember them jeering at me, ridiculing me, and telling me that I was, less than who I was, and then telling me again, take it. And I remember finally succumbing to that, and off to the races I went again. One thing I want to mention is that at 14 years of age in 1984, crack cocaine was introduced to the streets of Los Angeles, Texas. And at 14 years of age, I began to bend on cocaine to change the way I felt. Addiction and substance use have been a part of this cycle for me. And I'd never received, in times of incarceration or detention, the extent of the support I got was a video that basically was the equivalency of, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs. Now, I know things have changed. I've met young men that have told me that they have cognitive supports that they offer today. And I'll tell you, as an adult, those cognitive supports have been instrumental to me. But I'm going to yield by simply saying that every young person, like myself, we have a context that we are shaped and formed by. And I believe very firmly, in my instance, that context was not evaluated. The supports in my home life were not considered. The lack of supports were not considered. And I was looked at as an individual who became incorrigible. And I was responded to by the system as if I was fully capable of making competent, informed adult decisions, and I was not. And that became my reality even into my early 20s. Because if you're shaped by an experience like the institutions I was put in, and then there's no real opportunity outside of that experience to reform your thinking, you're left with the only thing that you have to function with, and that is the information you've acquired over the course of the few years you've been on this earth. One last thing I'll say, and this will be the end of my opening comment. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, didn't you learn your lesson? As if there's some magic lesson you're going to learn when you get put into an institution or a cage. There's no magic lesson. There are many things I learned. And then other people will say, well, didn't your mother and father teach you right? I'll say this. There was my mother and father, but there was also my peers. And there were also teachers. There were also the television and the radio. So there were many influences that shaped my thinking beyond just my mother and father. And then that question assumes that my mother and father may have had answers that were correct. And that was not the case in my household. My parents, they were not informed adults. They were just adults who had children, and they were trying to navigate what it meant to be a caretaker for young people that they didn't understand. My father was 45 when he had me, and my mother was 18. So just that dynamic, and they weren't married. So again, there was a context in my life, and my mother passed, and my stepmother would come into my life. But again, there was a context that I think we have to evaluate when we're talking about young people and trying to determine what best we can do to respond. I yield to you, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you, Rob. You know, that's a very compelling story. And it, for many of you, it may sound familiar in so many ways. It's difficult to even now sit here from the time that I can recall. It sounds very similar today as it did then in so many ways. The challenge always was the juvenile justice system was a mirror image of the adult justice system. So very often when I hear you talking about things in the boot camp and the discipline and what felt like a very rigid system, I'm sure it was difficult to tell how much it helped or how much did it hurt. Thank you for that presentation. Brittney, we're going to move on to you at this point. And again, welcome, and we thank you for joining us. Brittney, you are a parent of a child who has been dealing with the juvenile justice system. Would you please share with us how navigating help, legal or otherwise, for you and your child has been?
Navigating help, far as in the beginning, he was charged with a crime, a hideous crime, and I didn't know what to do. But I know we had a court-appointed attorney, and I chose to pay for an attorney, thinking that I was doing the best thing for my child at that time. But the first attorney was just out for the money. He was not no help. He'll say one thing, do something else. It was just an awful experience for 7 months. Then I had to hire another attorney to help with my son. And then I ran into Chantel. Life Anew with Sean Oliver. I met with him. He guided me, gave me Chantel's number for Grassroots, and it's been amazing working with them, helping me navigate through the system. That all my son's court appearances, his home release, it has been great. Grassroots has been my foundation to keep me sane, to help me, like Brother Rob said, help me with the language of what was going on, because I have not ever been in trouble with the system. I have never been in and out of the system. I never had to deal with the system in any type of way. So I was like a fish out of water. And they helped me a whole lot to understand it. They helped my son a whole lot. And then other organizations like Austin Area Urban League help with like financial assistance for me when I'm struggling with bills at one point. And then my son also have been through their program to get certified with OSHA in order to work construction. Mind you, he's still a high school student, but now he has a certification under him in order to go into the work community and be able to live and afford life for himself, because he's trying to change the trajectory of how the court system sees him. From I was hanging around with the wrong crowd, I got in this trouble. Now I'm trying to change. I'm away from the crowd. I got my mind right. I'm thinking clear, and it's been horrible, but it's been great. It's been more great than horrible.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to you.
That's great. Thank you for that. I do need to ask you now. We are talking about here in Travis County, where your son, where you and your son lived during this time.
Yes, we were in Travis County. He was arrested as an adult instead of a juvenile at the time. Like, they plastered his face on the news. and he still was a juvenile at the time and not an adult. And he wasn't even associated with the crime, but even going through the court system, he still they still attach him to the crime, even though they what's the word? They kind of vetoed him out, like he had nothing to do with it, but they still associate him with it. So it's like he's been held for something that he hasn't done, but he's charged with something, but they can't work on his charge unless they work on the other case first, and then they'll get to him. So now we're in a 2-year wait just to get an answer to even live in Travis County.
And that's
So he can't even start his life until they finish with the other case, until they even start on his case.
so this episode is continuing for you and your son.
Yes.
And how long has that been?
It's been since September 26, 2022.
I thank you for that, Brittney. As you all can hear, the challenges continue. And while there are resources available, the juvenile justice system, as well as the adult system, has begun to make different modifications over time. And certainly we can appreciate some of those efforts, but I'm sure as we can attest, it's just not enough. You know, as you are hearing now from Brittney, the challenge for her and her son has been going on now for a year, and right now she does not see resolution. That's challenging for a mother who has never been involved in a system. And then how do you navigate this system? I am without a map. I am without the resources. And I am a mother of more than this one child. The challenges continue. And we are hopeful that through these communications today, we will hear more about systems and what systems are doing to have a better outcome for youth. So we are having Judge Hernández, and we welcome you yet again, Judge Hernández. You are involved with an organization that's working to reduce recidivism among youthful offenders. Would you please talk to us a little bit about this work and how this is helping our youth to get their lives together after incarceration or after they've been detained?
Thank you. I want to first acknowledge that I'm deeply honored to be in this space. I'm honored to be on this panel with Rob and Brittney. I think lived experience is so important. I think I often say that our adversities become our testimony that changes lives with the people we love and in our community. And a big reason that I got involved with youth justice work is because I spent a lot of my life directly impacted by incarceration. My dad is formerly incarcerated. The majority of the men in my life have been formerly incarcerated, struggling with substance use and mental health. And I watched people that I deeply love be so disproportionately impacted by a system. And my dad is an immigrant. He's a predominantly Spanish speaker. So I served as the eldest daughter as a translator for him. And I recall being in courtrooms absolutely terrified, but having to maintain a very strong face for my dad, while he felt absolutely diminished by a system that often looked at him as less than human. And those experiences began to mold my interest in the law, mainly because I wanted to do something to help my family. And then I recognized, as much as we were in the courtroom, whether it was for eviction or whether it was for an immigration setting, that there were lots of families just like my family who also felt the same things that we were feeling. And so this motivated me to become the first person in my family to graduate high school. My dad dropped out when he was in the 8th grade. My mom dropped out in the 9th grade. But I knew that I felt called to try to make a difference in the legal field, because it was ingrained in me at a very young age that that's what we needed in our systems. And so when I went off to law school, I continued to do nonprofit work, specifically working with families who couldn't afford attorneys, helping them through evictions, helping them through family law cases, and then eventually found myself running for office to become a judge of a court that leads a program called the Transformative Youth Justice Program. And I specifically ran for this court to run this program because I experienced the impacts of a system, and what really changed my life was mentorship and meeting people who had experienced exactly the same things that I had experienced growing up, who had gone off to school, who had gone off to become lawyers. And so I knew that we could really begin to change the lives of people, of young people impacted by a system, by connecting them with people with lived experience, by connecting them with mentors, by connecting them with organizations that saw them in their wholeness of who they are. And when we started the program, this year, we made some changes. The program's been around for a while, but we made some big changes in the program this year to make it more community-centered, to provide developmentally appropriate support, intervention, and mentorship. And we're working with over 15 organizations to provide trauma-informed programming, mental health support, peer support training, educational support, and career development support. And the goal is, how can we set up our participants with success? And the best way to do that is to surround them by community. We have to remind them that this community is invested into their success, their well-being, their overall health. And the most beautiful part is when they get to meet someone who leads an organization like Tomorrow's Promise Foundation, and they've never met Bill. They've never met Bill Wallace before, but Bill talks to them like he's known them for years. And it just reminds all of us that we're connected. And so we begin to build support systems to remind our participants that there are people who love and support them no matter what. It doesn't matter what they've been through, what they have found themselves caught up in. They are human, and we support and love them because we are a part of this community together. And so the goal of all of this is to help reduce recidivism and to increase public safety by creating a network of care around our participants that truly says, hey, you're experiencing housing issues, how can we help you? You're experiencing food insecurity, let's go and find you some food. Whatever it is that may pop up, it doesn't matter how big or how small, they don't have to deal with it alone. And oftentimes, I think when we build this trust in the system and we remind them that they are not the mistakes that they have made, they are not the circumstances that they have found themselves in, but they are human, and we can all overcome, especially when we have a support system. And so we work with a lot of organizations like Tomorrow's Promise Foundation, African American Youth Harvest Foundation, the UT School of Social Work, also working with the Austin Area Urban League, really trying to make sure we work with organizations who have built the trust in the community to truly make a difference. And so our main goal is to just continue to connect our participants back into the community that loves them and to reinvest into their future. And I constantly share with them, I say, I've been there. I grew up in a household that had water off very often. A utility was off in our house so often that I thought that was normal until I went off to school and learned that, oh, that wasn't something that everyone experienced. And I share this with them because I want them to recognize and to see in me similar experience, because I know that if mentorship and support can change my life, it can change anyone's life. And it's about reminding folks that they have the power already in them. They are enough, just as they are right now, to truly begin to change the trajectory of their life. They can do it, and we believe in them. And so I'm really honored to have this conversation and to hopefully it continue to ignite conversation that reminds all of us that we can do this work together.
Thank you, Judge Hernández. Very, very compelling conversation to hear a little bit about you and your background, which I think probably makes you an even more powerful advocate. Understanding what it's like to walk into these systems as a young person is just so important for a person in your position, which I have to think you have a not so typical court. And with that said, would you just take us through a process that you may have that use with one of the families or youth that comes into your court?
Yeah, so one of the first things we do in the program is we do it's called a social determinants of health assessment. So we're asking questions like, what are you experiencing right now? And getting a gauge of what are some social issues that we can begin to help with right at the get-go. And this allows us to create an individualized plan. I think one of the worst things we can do is try to create a one-size-fits-all approach to anything, because we're human. We all have different experiences. We learn differently. We listen differently. So we have to figure out an individualized plan that builds trust based on the specific needs of our participant, of our youth. Once we've done that assessment, then we're meeting with them on a pretty consistent basis to check in. How are you doing? And we're not even talking about the case. The case doesn't matter at the end of the day, because what really matters is what are you experiencing and how can we provide support to you? And so oftentimes it's just checking in to make sure that they're connecting with resources. If they're having a hard time connecting, we're providing them with support for someone else to help make those phone calls, because we all know just in our day-to-day how hard it is to make a phone call to set up any type of appointment, right? Now imagine that you're a youth, and now imagine that you're maybe a second support system within your household and you're helping take care of your siblings. And so we try to break down all these barriers to connect to resources. And then we ask, how are those resources going? Right? Are they working for you? Right? There are many providers that provide educational support. Maybe one organization doesn't work best for you. Maybe another organization would work best. And so we're willing to say, okay, we made a referral there. It didn't work. That's okay. Let's find another referral, right? It's about being willing to create solutions that best fit the participant and not a one-size-fits-all approach. Some other things I do in my courtroom in general is I don't say offender, I don't say defendant. I feel like those are dehumanizing words oftentimes. So I refer to them just as their name, right? I say, Mr. Hayes, how are you doing today? And then I ask them based on what they've shared with me in the past. If they've shared with me that someone had just passed, I ask, how are you handling that? I remind them that grief is normal. I try to just remember that we're all having a human experience, right? And so I've learned that just doing those small things of checking in with people and really getting to see them and removing the labels that we often are used in criminal justice systems, that begins to calm people down in a way where we can get to the root, which is really what the goal should be. How do we get to the root issue? And how do we solve that together and continue to try to create safety for everyone, including the person that I'm working with right there in front of me.
That is such a beautiful expression to refer to these young people as in a humane perspective, to use their names, to not refer to them in such a way that they will already feel guilty or, if you will, oppressed. I think it's so important that you don't see criminals walking into a courtroom, that you may see a person who is in need of help, in need of assistance. And that, after all, was a premise for our juvenile justice system. But somewhere down the line, we began to stray. And it is just so important that we have judges like you and others who are really working to change that trajectory of our youth. So many of them are in this pipeline and headed into an adult system for who knows how long. And we thank you for your service and what it is that you do to make those changes. I want to move back now to you, Brother Rob and Brittney, because we really want to hear a little bit from you about how we all can help reduce recidivism based on your experiences. How can we all do it better? We heard a little bit from the judge and understanding what she's doing to help make it better. And we'd appreciate hearing from you all with your particular lived experiences. Brother Rob?
Brittney, okay, I was going to offer Brittney the floor first, but I'll go ahead and jump in. I want to, if you can see the title of this book, It's called Juvenile Justice in the Making. I want to recommend it to each and every one of you to read Juvenile Justice in the Making, because I appreciate Judge Hernandez's commentary and her selective choice of language. You know, one of the things that I've learned as I've been grappling with my place in this society is, how could this happen to me? There is an element of choice involved in this, but what does the word choice mean for a child or a young person? I think, you know, one of the things we have to do is grapple with some of the underlying arguments that our society continues to hold on to about youth. On one hand, we pity them when they are the victims of, let's say, for example, sexual assault. But the moment that same young person who's been a victim turns around and commits an offense that victimizes somebody else, we wag our finger at them and we condemn them as guilty, and we fail to see them in the same way that we just saw them when they were the victim of a harm. So I think we have to remove our double standard. We have to begin to look at this person based on the science that's now available to us. Young people's frontal lobes they're not fully developed until the age of 21. There's research that supports this. I don't have the citations in front of me, but that is important for us to remember that we're in a new age, but we're still using antiquated knowledge to govern the way we address the social problems that grow out of youth. One other thing I want to say, and I want to make sure I leave ample time for Brittney, is that, you know, so the double standard is there, and we have to reevaluate that. I want to also read a quote from this book. Again, it's called Juvenile Justice in the Making. I want to read this. It's from the foreword. How does society deal with its young miscreants in ways that are fair, humane, and recognizable, just? I'm skipping. Property relationships between human beings were eroding. We're talking about the early 20th century. Although children had been the exclusive legal property of adult males for centuries, subject to their physical terror, torture, exploitation, and sale, agitation about the rights of incarcerated children developed momentum in the Reconstruction years, when legal arguments and court opinions in Illinois closely linked slavery concepts with a lively debate on the nature of childhood. And if children are indeed legal persons, what kind of persons are they? Emphasis added. These fundamental constructs of humanness, as Judge Hernandez was talking about, involve issues of constitutional rights, civil rights, criminal justice, and human rights for the majority of the world's people, its children. Again, I think we need to be having a greater conversation around what is our philosophy towards children? When do we have an open public conversation besides what we're doing today, which I'm very grateful for Integral Care for doing this? But when do we sit down and talk about children in a meaningful way, other than to say things like platitudes, the children are our future, or these kids are going astray? We have to be more intentional in our discourse with one another. And I believe that it's imperative that we also create spaces where we as a community, elders and youth, have conversations with the young folk present in the same room. I'll yield to Ms. Brittney.
Could I say something, please?
Yes, before we go to Brittney, yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Luella Tate, and I'm a dean at ACC. However, I'm very interested in what you're talking about because many years ago, my son got into so much trouble. I was divorced, and finally I remarried his dad, and I was widowed. My special ed son started with no pass, no play. After that, he spun out into everything he was big enough to do. I tell people that when my husband died, I had money, but after I got finished with criminal justice, I was broke. And in fact, I'm still working and glad to be working. Brittney, I wanted to say, you said there's been a year over a long time that you're waiting for the case to come up. I'm praying and hoping that lots of things will wash themselves out because you're saying that your son was borderline an accomplice or whatever else. So sometimes things can shake themselves out a little bit, but the hint that I want to bring to you, and the judge brought it on about community. The time that you're waiting now is the time to rebuild your son's life so that whenever he does come up, he has church activities, he has school activities, he had viable hobbies, he might be doing community service. Your role right now, and I'm telling you, until I got with a Black attorney, female, who sat me down and said, this is what your job is. You have got to recast your son from a big time criminal to a humanizable person in the community. You're going to have to reattach him to a supportive and safe community, not them folks that he's hung with. You need to constructively fill up his time. And you're going to rebuild him on paper so that whenever he came up, we used to call it the dog and pony show, okay? The pastor would come and, Judge, I don't know if this thing's help, if you feel recasting that person's life trajectory, if you feel that's something that's very helpful. It sounds like they're doing the kinds of activities, and I really wish there had been some programs, Tomorrow's Promise or the different programs or so. To my knowledge, there wasn't anything. But think of the time that you have now to recast your child's life. And I'm saying on paper, but to holistically put that child in the community, prove that's a safe individual in the community, and put them in touch. And the judge mentioned mentorship, which is so very important. My son's mentor came to court one time and talked about the things that, keep in mind, my son had no father figure, talked about the things that my son was now doing and everything else. His attorney and I were shocked that he got probation. Shocked. Did you hear me? We didn't expect that because he'd done so many things. But I just wanted to say, think about building community trust in your child. Think about what things you can do. And Judge, please wade in if you think these things are helpful. I know that filling up my son's time constructively was the best thing that I ever did. So I want to thank you. It took me all the way back when I saw the topic of how much we have gone through, how many court systems, how many different scenarios. And I think we have to be careful because special ed in many of our little rural towns is nothing more than a pipeline to the prison system. So I hope that, someone out there is listening, and hopefully it will make a difference for someone. It did for my child. And I thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I answer some of her questions?
Please go right ahead.
My son we always have been a pillar in the community. Always.
Okay.
Like we always fed homeless. I've always had mentorships from his godparents, from my godparents. He's a structurally sound young man. It's just,
Excellent.
grief will have you acting out. He lost his brother to cancer 4 years ago. 6 months after that, he lost his grandfather, which was the only father figure he had. And then 6 months after that, my nephew, which is his cousin, that I was also adoptive parent to, was murdered. So he has grief that he was lashing out and attaching himself to the wrong type of company. Now, at this point in his life, he's changed, like even now, like I say, he's rebuilding himself. He went to go get a certificate to work construction. So now he's able to go get qualified, skilled employment. He's still a high school student at this time, so he's still doing that as well. So his time is being occupied. Brother Rob steps in with him doing soft skills and other men's activities. So he's very embedded into the community because I believe in giving back.
Oh, I thank you for that, Brittney. I think that one of the things that I just want to reemphasize from Brother Bob, Rob.
You get it right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. One of the things that's just so important, I think, is what you said about the science as we understand it today about youth and youth development. And some of the things we do to our youth are not going to be conducive to them just simply because they do not have the capacity to make those types of critical decisions that we always put them in situations that they have to. So any practitioner who's really working with youth, I think, will need to understand a lot about brain science as we know it today. So that way we will be able to avoid some of the challenges that we may have in communicating with families and communicating within systems, knowing that our youth brain development, and while we're talking about 21 years old, that's for, I think it's more like 25 for the young men in terms of the gray matter hardening and being able at some point to make these better decisions. But you can't make the decisions unless you've been on with them and you've been given that information. And I appreciate your feedback, Dr. Tate. I think that was so important and thought compelling as well. But very briefly, I was just wondering, Brittney, are there instances and opportunities perhaps where you may have needed some special attention to yourself instead of giving your all to your children and what you do? What about you? What do you do to keep yourself healthy?
Went to my doctor and told him I'm not suicidal, but I need some help. I'm going through a hard time. Far as that's pretty much it. I find other ways like yoga, meditation, reading books, taking long walks, traveling, sitting by water. Those are things that I do in order to really self-soothe or self-medicate myself through this troubled time. And far as like I said, Chantel, Brother Rob, the other members at Grassroots, I have leaned on them as well when I feel overwhelmed with things, because it has been things back to back with car troubles, finances, work, everything. It's questionable sometimes, like, what am I doing this for? Yes, I get weak. I want to give up at times, but God does not put nothing on your back that you can't bear. So he gonna see me through this, and we gonna get victory in the end of all of it.
That's beautiful. I thank you for that. I
Brother
think
Hayes,
now, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, if I just may throw one more thought out there. I know our time is quickly coming to an end. This is a very complex conversation, and I'm so grateful that I was even able to play just a small part in bringing some light to it. One thing I do feel is important to bring up, I work with Grassroots Leadership right now. I want to emphasize the program that Brittney's talking about is called Participatory Defense. So if anybody that you know has a loved one going through the criminal legal process, we walk alongside those family members and we offer our lived experience with navigating that system to those folk who are advocating for their loved one who may be ensnared by that process. So you can find us on grassrootsleadership.org. I want to mention that. Secondly, when we're working with young folk, and this grows out of my own experience, we have to be prepared for them to perpetually make mistakes. There's just no way in the world they're going to get it right because we give them an instruction one time. And if we say that we love the children, we have to have long suffering. We have to be prepared to be sometimes offended, and we have to have self-control. And in my humble opinion, if we fail to adopt that kind of inward disposition, we're giving lip service to a problem that requires deep and profound transformation within our own selves. Your children by nature are wired to make mistakes. They're trying to find their footing in this world. And too often, I think if I've heard one person, adult, say this, I've heard 1,000 say it. Children are to be seen and not to be heard. I don't believe that. I believe that children need to be engaged, they need to be seen, and they need to be heard. We need to be creating spaces where we listen to them. And I believe that as we listen to them, we can hear the cries, the need for help. We can hear them articulate what it is that they might be grappling with. And this is my closing statement. Going back to Brittney's statement, if you heard my story, she talked about grief. That was the driving force behind all of my bad decisions as a young person. My mother died at 8 years of age, and I did not know how to process that. I heard somebody give a trite answer, God giveth and he taketh away, and I got angry at God. That did not help me navigate the emotions, the complex emotions that came. I didn't even have words to describe my emotions. So a lot of what I think we need to do to work with our young folk is we need to take our time and to increase their emotional intelligence, give them language by which to identify what they may be feeling. And that means accessing the things that they're learning from TikTok, Facebook. We got to get in those spaces and walk along with them as they become formed by some of those ideas as well. That'll be all I've got to say. Thank you.
Oh, how critical that was, being able to communicate with them in the way that they communicate today. We have a tendency to reject that and trying to pull our youth and young people back into our old methods of communication, and it doesn't work, and we wonder why. I see Miss Tisha Hood. I see that's your hand up. Please
Hi.
unmute yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having this conversation today. I'm a community health worker, and so my perspective comes obviously from the health lens. And I'm wondering if there was a position or a place in your youth experiences for anyone on this call to address if there was something more than just behavioral, and if it was linked to some type of medical condition underneath, and wondering what types of spaces or places you all have identified that can help those that are preventative and proactive before many of our youth enter the judicial system.
I can respond to that right quick.
Mhm.
Just I'm gonna be very succinct. I am now currently diagnosed with major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. I was not identified as such until I was an adult. I had never, as a youth, ever been given access to a healthcare provider. I didn't even see a medical provider until I went into a juvenile institution. So, and even then, I was failed because they did not screen me properly for a mental health condition. So all of that to say, I do believe that in my instance, particularly, that was the case. And today, thankfully, I do receive support through Integral Care, through the ANU Clinic, and I advocate for mental health in my community. And I mention that because in my home, we didn't talk about mental health. We had other pejoratives that we used to describe people that had, idiosyncrasies or odd behaviors, and we didn't talk about anything that grew out of those behaviors. We dismissed them. We made fun of them. And so I think it's important that in our communities, we normalize conversations around mental health. Just like Ms. Brittney was asked, how is she taking care of herself? We need to make it customary that we ask each other in genuine ways, how are you caring for yourself today? That's my comment.
Thank you. We are open for additional questions or comments. So if you would just raise your hand, I'd appreciate it.
I'm raising my personal hand.
Oh, go ahead, Brittney.
What I've noticed working in the school district as well, and along with my son, youth is not willing to talk. Even though, like, I took my son to counseling about all of this before we even got to where we are today. But they refuse to talk because they're looking for answers. They want somebody else to give them the answer how they get over the pain that they feel. But then when they don't get the answer that they have to work through and navigate through those emotions on their own, they don't want it. They want the quick solution of, how do I get back to my regular self? They want the solution. They want answers because everything to them now are fast. Instagram. It's whatever knowledge you want out there, you put it out there, they get it instantly. And that's what they're looking for. They're not like us older generation where we had to work through and navigate through all of those pains on our own. Because I took my mom off life support. I was 15 years old. And I have literally been doing this. One of my loved ones, closest loved ones, leaving me every 2 years since 1995. So I'm not saying that I'm hardened from it, like, oh, it's just normal, oh, they leaving. But they'll be here in spirit, you know, so I understand, but it's also having a faith base. And a lot of these kids don't even have faith base. They don't even know what that is. They don't even know who God is. They don't have a relationship. Some of them don't go to church. So they're just living and existing, and the parents are working in order to provide, because in the economy we're in now, like, we can't just lay at home and not do anything. So now we're out working tremendous amount of hours just to provide room and shelter and food for our kids, bare minimum basic. So the youth are getting out of hand because we can't afford not to work, but they really raising themselves at this point. And our parents are not doing what old parents used to do, come to the school with rollers on, in their hair, with the shoe, ready to not take the kid side, but take the adult side, because it's a respect thing. But that's not happening anymore.
Mm-hmm. We certainly have some additional growing up ourselves to do as we continue to move forward and learning how to work with our young people today. Isn't that an amazing thing to say? Learning how to work with our young people today. And we should not be arrogant about it, because we really do need to learn how to work with our young people today. I see you, Sandra Bernal. If you'll unmute yourself and let's hear what you have to say.
Hi, yes. So I am a student at the University of Texas of the Permian Basin. So I'm about 6 hours from y'all. I was wondering if y'all offered y'all services out here. And Judge, you had mentioned your program. I was wondering how we can advocate for something like that in this particular area. Permian Basin is it's considered a resource desert. So there's not a lot of things for these kids to be able to return back to. You know, Brittney, you had mentioned not being able to work through these emotions, or not be able to handle it. And I think today what we see, particularly down here in this area, is they 100% have the ability and the capacity to work through those things, and they do it through drugs. They do it through alcohol. They know how to get that quick fix. I know what will change the way that I feel inside. And why would I want to go through that pain and suffering of always screwing up one more time, when this can just completely take me out of my reality? And then down here, an issue that we're seeing right now is our youth are overdosing on fentanyl. There are no places for them to go get treatment. There are very little resources that we have for them to be able to say, here, let's try this instead. So I guess from y'all's perspective, like, what could we do in this particular area to be able to ensure that we start getting them, or advocate for them in a way that Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston have been able to do?
You know, I'll just jump in really quick to say, if you're looking to see a youth diversion program start up in your area, to reach out to the local judges in your area and sit down and chat with them and tell them that this is a priority that you have, and get other community members to come with you. Judges are elected officials, and though we are bound to follow the law, we can create initiatives to make a difference within our communities. And so I think it really requires you to stand up and hold your elected officials accountable and say, this is the type of justice that we want to see in our areas, and hold feet to fire to say that we want to see progress. And I can guarantee you that type of meeting will catch some attention and hopefully begin movement in building a program like what we have now down in your area.
And it is so critical for your elected officials to be engaged. There's no way around having to deal with elected officials. So your county commissioners and as well as your city council. And I will say that there are literally millions of dollars available for the treatment of opiates, and with that, fentanyl. It is waiting for opportunities. The money is waiting for opportunities to be spent. You hear what I'm saying? So the state of Texas, as through the federal government, has received millions of dollars, and your elected officials know about it. Sometimes they lack the institutional will. Tisha, is that another hand raised for you? We are really getting to our time limit. Jennifer Kelly, you go, and you'll be our last comment.
Well, thank you so much. I have a quick question after I sat and listened to everyone, especially you, Miss Brittney. I appreciate you expressing yourself the way that you have expressed yourself. And it kind of reminds me of when my son was going through all of his adolescent behaviors in school and being a single parent. So I'm not going to make this question fancy at all, but I'm wondering, with all of the beautiful minds that are on this call today, is there anybody, any celebrity? Because I think you said it, Mr. Lilly, we have to be able to talk to the kids in a way that they understand. And it is very difficult, whether or not you're in Travis County or in any other county, for a young person, and I'm going to say ages 9 to 16, to have access to a extracurricular activity that doesn't create a financial hardship for the family. And we can all say, back in the day, we had programs, they were free. You can participate in school activities, they were free. Now to play football is going to cost you probably $500 on a high school team. If you want to be in the band, it's going to cost you $200 or $300. And parents just cannot afford those costs. And so I understand the rules and getting out and voting, but it seems to me, I wonder if there can be like a task force to find these wonderful celebrities that the kids now worship and they listen to for some apparent reason, because they're on TV and they're on TikTok and Instagram, that can formulate programs within our communities. I'm thinking about the one right now, the one that Steve Harvey has in Dallas. Every time I see it, it looks like he has a lot of young men at his camp, but it's hard to access. Is there anything in this area that a professional team has created, the university has created, that makes it easy for a child to participate in an extracurricular activity that doesn't cause a hardship for the family and is easy to access?
Yes, there is. They just recently changed their name, but they were Austin Steelers. They have a free track club, and their football prices are reasonable. The coaches work with you. They do a lot of on the corner donations, selling water program, just in case the parents that don't have. They've been in football and track. I know they've been in football for over, I'm 44. I've been on this this football leader since I was 16 years old. He's been picking up kids from all over Austin area, taking them, practicing, taking them. He drives them to track meets out of the state. Amazing team, Austin Steelers. They're called Junior Jags right now. They changed their name because their football program feeds off into LBJ's football program and athletic program as well. They have students from that's playing for Houston. what is it? They play for Houston. He has some playing for Oklahoma. He has a student from Vanderbilt playing that came off of his little league team. So yes, ma'am, there's resources. Manor has a football team as well. Yes, there's programs. There's programs out here that won't cost you an arm and a leg.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great feedback, Brittney.
Thank you for that so much. And I
Absolutely.
really appreciate it. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes, but I'm really directing this question to
Mhm.
the folks on the panel who can call in the people to have a task force to really be able to discuss everything that we have talked about. Even you, Mr. Lilly, the mental health, the programs, just having a platform that can enrich a kid to the point they want to sit down and talk to a mental health provider, because the stress is real. And I know there's programs out there that deals with football and track, but we really need to get to the heart of the kids. But it's going to take every community leader to see how we can formulate a task force to be able to address the heart, mind, and spirit of the young people that we are serving in this day and age, because this is a very challenging time right now.
I thank you for that. Just very quickly, I just want to mention the Austin Area Urban League, and I also want to mention the African American Harvest Foundation, who are really engaged in working with our youth and will be very resourceful to anyone. I also have linked into the chat box the Black Men's Health Clinic, such a critical resource that we need for that whole wellness that we've talked about. Those who are not insured and have difficulties paying, as they say, there is no wrong door. They will be able to provide assistance either through them or through some of their resources.
And
folks, we've run up on our time limit. In fact, we may have skirted a little bit by that. Go ahead, Rob. You want to?
No, I didn't want to take any more time. I just want to mention also another resource that we have a new trauma center in Austin. And if you've been a victim of a crime in the last 3 years, or you've perpetrated a crime that's caused harm against someone else, you can receive services through this clinic for free. And to the sister, just really quickly, sister, just, inbox your information. It sounds like you have a determination to see something become a reality. Let us have this conversation with one another. And I'm an organizer. That's what I do by profession. We don't have to be limited to this space to have a conversation. Inbox us your information through Miss Lady Jane Aqua, and we'll get connected with you, and we'll figure out a way to make it happen. We'll beat the drum until we get some more people involved, because the children belong to all of us, and we have to look at what we have created here. The message that this platform holds is together we heal. Either we're going to take that seriously, or we're going to keep using it as a platitude. And it sounds like you're someone that's really ready to take that seriously. So just reach out to us and let's figure out how we can move forward. Thank you.
Fantastic, sir. That trauma center is also located at the African American Harvest Foundation, Men and Boys. So feel free, folks. There are resources, but I love what you just said, Brother Rob. We got to connect with each other, and sometimes these are going to be grassroots efforts. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is our last forum for the year, but we are preparing for 2024. And we are beginning with the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference coming in February 6th at the Palm Event Center. Please register. You will find that it is very, very low cost, and it is a great opportunity to connect, do some of the networking you're talking about, and perhaps build these coalitions or resources to help build these coalitions. Folks, we also want to encourage you to joining our Facebook page, and let's keep this kind of conversation going, because if we are not talking about it, then a lot of things won't happen. With that said, I thank each and every one of you once again, and we'll see you early next year. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all for having me as well.
Thank y'all.